Uh, we're going to talk today about Philippians 3 or 2, actually 14 through 30, and you can turn your Bibles there because we're going to go through it this morning. How many? You probably don't listen to YouTube or Instagram or all those kind of things, and Instagram. Some of those things I kind of don't do because I don't like watching all the stuff, but. Southern California pastor the other day said that he would not fight for religious freedom because religious freedom supports false religion, and it doesn't matter who said that. But what do you imagine happened? Anything? Anybody?
Somebody got upset.
There's a big uproar, and people saying yes, and other people saying no, and this and that and the other thing, and it was a big, huge uproar, I was looking at. I do watch YouTube, but I shouldn't support Google, but I do have a Google phone, and I do watch YouTube sometimes, or too much actually. My wife says, and I was watching this theological thing. A guy was kind of presenting his views on his view of limited atonement. We're not going to talk about that, but of course, Reformed people have a view of the atonement which is limited. Jesus Christ only died for some people, the ones that are elect, and then those that have unlimited atonement have, Jesus died for everybody, and so forth. So there's a big theological argument over this, back and forth, and it was interesting. In these two guys were talking about this, and arguing back and forth, and then they went and had a great time as friends at lunch. And that's kind of perhaps a picture of what Jesus is or Paul is talking about here, in that he's saying, in the first thing that he says is do all without grumbling or disputing. He does that. He talks about that. Then, secondly, he gives two examples of people that walk in a good way and walk as God's kids, and so that's kind of the way that it flows here through 30. But do all things without grumbling or disputing. Now this is not Yoda here. This is not grumbling and disputing. Do not do these things. It actually, in the Greek, it starts with do all. And so it's the focus of everything that we do. We have a will, and part of that will is we do things. And the things that we do, the things how we walk out life is without grumbling or disputing. The Greek word for grumbling is gugosmos, which kind of sounds like grumbling, doesn't it? It's a bad attitude expressed in a complaint or grumbling, often in private. I was grumbling a little bit this morning. Our refrigerator, some of you know we need a new one, and from time to time the refrigerator part quits working. So you have to take all the food out, let it unfreeze for 24 hours, and then put it back, and then it works for a while again. And so it's kind of a reminder we need a new refrigerator. But in the meantime, it's like, again, you got to do this. And that's grumbling. Oftentimes it's in private, but not always. And it's like, the disputing, however, is a little different. It's often in public, and that's dialogosmos, which is arguments over truth speculations, like limited atonement, okay? Legal disputes, often in public. It's often used in legal disputes. In the middle of the word is logos, basically. What does that mean? Word, through word, and that's where it comes from. It's like you have two concepts or two words colliding. It's basically through words, but it's two words colliding. And so that's what's going on here. That's disputing in an argument over truth speculations. Another example, I give bad examples today for myself. I'm not sure about this. I went and got a vaccine the other day, Friday. This is not whether you should get vaccine or not. If you want to, good. But I went and got the first. I ended up being the first of the Pfizer vaccine. Well, that was fine. I got there and it worked out pretty well. The Army was there and stuff. Getting there was a different story. Okay, I go down. I just looked on the map and it was all clear down Loop 12 and around 30 and stuff to get to Fair Park. So I get on to Loop 12 there by the church, off of Illinois, if you know where that is, but if you don't, it doesn't matter. I mean, I look up and it is absolutely stopped. I mean, not just going slow, I mean stopped. So I go like the Tahoe in front of me over in my Hyundai, I didn't have my truck, and over the grass over to get off and turn around and go the other way, okay? Because I'm not sitting in there for an hour. And I'm going down, and over here, there's no cars. They had Loop 12 absolutely stopped for a huge wreck. Okay, so I was, now I gotta go the other way. That's grumbling, okay? And and then I get to this place. And it's like there's one sign, and it's got, you go around here, and so you go all the way down and make a U-turn. Well, why don't they just open this up right here? That's grumbling, And then I come back, and I get a phone call about my truck, which makes me grumble also. But but then I'm talking, and I miss my turn, so I'm going up at rush hour, even now, up 35 the wrong direction. That was a huge mistake, and so I'm grumbling some more. That's grumbling, okay? All of us do it, but it says do not do that. If you look at Instagram, it does, or what's the other one? The Twitter space, or what? The Twitter floods, and sometimes Facebook. I mean, it's just like, this is like disputes. This is arguments, and it's like, I don't care who you are as a person, I'm going to tear you down. That's what this is, because that's what lawyers do. I also wanted to be a lawyer at one time. And what do you do as a lawyer? I mean, you tear apart the other argument and the other person if you can. And I'm not saying that's a good thing to do, but that's what this is talking about. And he says, do all things without that, okay? And it kind of comes from the Old Testament, and this is not a new concept. Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians 10. Do not grumble as some of them did in the Old Testament and were destroyed by the destroyer. If you remember, that's back in Exodus and also in Numbers, you see that concept. The whole congregation of the Lord, the sons of Israel, grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And God did not take kindly to this very, very much, and he didn't like that. So essentially, this is part of the reason that they got the law, because they were grumbling. So he, at this point, just, okay, people, I'm just going to give them food then, because that's what they were grumbling about. Look at all this stuff back in Egypt that we got, but now we're out here with nothing. They just went through the sea, and I mean, here's God, he did this great miracle, and they're out there grumbling about, where's my food? And we had better back there in Egypt where we were slaves. And then in Numbers 16, it did the same thing in Korah's rebellion. He rebelled against God, and rebelled against Moses and Aaron. But on the next day, all the congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, you're the ones who have caused the death of the Lord's people. Okay, now what's this? Korah rebelled against Moses and Aaron and some of his family, and said they weren't good leaders and all this kind of stuff, and so they were rebelling against the leaders, rebelling against God, and he said, okay, you can stand out here, and what happens? The earth opens up, and in they go, hollering and screaming, and so that's what happened. There's a rebellion, and these people died. Quite a few, about 200 I think, died. And so that's what they're grumbling about. And so what happens this time? Okay, you're grumbling about what I did, God says. And what does he do? There comes a plague, and more die. And so Aaron has to stand up between the dead and the living as the priest of God and halt the plague. And so this is what Paul is referring to in Corinthians. He said this stuff is serious stuff. It's not just a suggestion. Okay, so but in here he doesn't say do all things without grumbling or disputing, or God's going to judge you. He doesn't say that here. What does he say here? There's a reason for that, so that people see us as God's kids. So that you will prove yourselves to be blameless and innocent children of God, above reproach, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you appear as lights in the world. Boom. This is the reason. Because what are you supposed to be? witnesses. You can't be good witnesses if you're known by grumbling and complaining like those folks back in the Old Testament. Do all things without grumbling and disputing. We'll take these one at a time. Prove yourselves. There's a progress kind of associated with this in the tenses. So it's like you are proving on a daily basis as you grow and people see that. You are proving yourselves, and you're proving yourselves to be blameless. There's nothing that people can say about you. Above reproach is kind of a very similar word meaning to these words. Very similar meaning to these words here too. In the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, pretty much today, right? I mean, if we look out, we live in a crooked and perverse generation. 40 years ago, it was less so because there was still a bigger remembrance of the Judeo-Christian ethic and so forth. I mean, we've never been a Christian country, so to speak, but there was a walking in some Judeo-Christian ethics, and more so in the Constitution than the Declaration of Independence. But people walked a little differently. Today, if you say something like, we're talking about marriage, if you say something of marriage is between a man and a woman, what do you get? You put that out there, you're going to get slammed. Why? Canceled. Why? Because you can't say that. What does that say? We live in a crooked and perverse generation. If you say, we should not be killing kids in the womb, oh, that is like the baddest thing that you can say, right? We live in a crooked and perverse generation. Now, it's not to say that we should not speak into that generation. We should. It's not to say we should not discuss between ourselves and try to come to the truth. But we need to be loving to one another as we do that. And we can go and we can, you're not hating one another. You're walking together as friends. Even you might have a different viewpoint on some things that are not essential, like who Jesus is and how the salvation and the resurrection and he's coming again. In the midst of that disgusting generation. And where was Paul? He was in Rome writing this, in jail. Who was he writing to? The Philippians. You know, they had it wasn't only Ephesus that had Diana. Philippians, Philippi, there's like not a temple, but outside of the city, there's a representation of Diana killing a deer, you know, and so the Greek god. And so, and they were in the midst of a crossroads of trade. So what do you get when you're in the midst of a crossroads of trade? You get some pretty disgusting stuff going on. And so that's the context that they lived. Now, now I get to tell a good story on myself. I was, I think we'll go down in the midst of, and then lights of the world. Let's go all the way down. When I was an electrician, I was working on a pretty big project in Las Colinas, which is in Irving, and it was in a GTE building, and that was back when there was GTE. Now they were bought by Verizon or Sprint. I don't know how that all worked out, but anyway, at the time, they were building this big educational complex where there are people from all over the several states came in to be trained. And so, you know, they were kind of, at that point, cutting edge technology, which would be pretty funny today, but cutting edge technology. And so there were certain things that weren't quite working out, or certain things that, oh, we want to add that. Well, what's that going to take? Well, it's going to take this. And so there was this discussion, and, you know, how are we going to do this? And what's the best way to do it? And twice I heard people say, or that were in the building, you know, you don't really complain a lot about this stuff. Well, that's really different. And it's like, see, I can tell good stories on myself too. And then what is that? Lights in the world. Because you're trying to find what's best. You're trying to work things out. You see, they saw that and they said, you know, that's not something that we see a whole lot. You know, even with people we employ. And so what happened in that, I did get an opportunity to witness a little bit in those contexts. It's a little harder in corporate society, but it's like, I got lots of business. We got lots of business there because of that. And so that's what lights in the world. That's who we are supposed to be. And Paul says that's how we do that. And then holding fast to the word of life, that's the gospel, so that in the day of Christ I will have reason to glory because I did not run in vain nor toil in vain. This holding fast, it can either be holding fast or holding forth. The same, both concepts can be in the words and the tenses. And so what it is, I'm not sure either one, but both are good. We're supposed to hold fast to the word. We're supposed to hold forth the word. By the way, if you hold forth the word, you hold fast to the word, by the way. And so what is it? So in the day of Christ, I will have reason to glory. That's a nice way of saying I have reason to boast, because that's also like a definition of this word. And so what's he saying? He says, I want you as Philippians to walk with God, to be the kind of people that you want to be God's kids, so that when I see Jesus, I can say, look at the Philippians. And it's like, and is that bad? Is he boasting? Is he doing these things, and is he vain by doing these things? Not really. It's okay to like it, to be boastful of people that are walking, that you've had something to do with. And that's what Paul is saying. And he has a relationship with the Philippians. I mean, it's not like, he just kind of is writing to somebody he doesn't know. And so he said this is part of the reality, because something's kind of going on in the back of his mind. He's in Rome, and he's waiting a judgment. And that judgment is uncertain. That judgment may end up in his death. And so he's saying, I may see Jesus here pretty soon, in my death. And I think he's seen Jesus before. I think Jesus came and spoke to him as an apostle, perhaps up to 3 years. But here he's saying, I'm in Rome, I'm waiting judgment, but really what we want is rejoicing. I may be an offering poured out. What's that? That's a sacrifice. That's a kind of a euphemism for death. And in 17 and 18, I'll just kind of read it here. Holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I will have reason to glory, because I did not run in vain nor toil in vain. But even if I am being poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrifice and service of your faith, I rejoice and share my joy with you. You too, I urge, also rejoice in the same way and share your joy with me. Philippians is about joy. There's a whole lot of joy in Philippians. There's it's a book in which Paul is like said just before, to me in 121, for me to live, for to me to live is Christ and to die is gain. But if I am to live on in the flesh, then this will mean fruitful labor for me, and I do not know which to choose. But I'm hard pressed in both directions, having the desire to depart and be with Christ, for that is very much better. He's saying, I might be judged. They might cut my head off. Can't crucify him because he's a Roman citizen. Cut my head off. But what's going to happen? I'm going to be with Jesus, and hopefully, because you guys are walking well, we can rejoice with you guys in you Philippians in the way that you're walking. And even though that I'm gone, we still rejoice, because remember what I just said? Going to be with Jesus is better. Now, God's left me here, and it's good for you. It's good for us, to all be here together. But, for me, it's like to live as Christ. To die is it terrible? is gain. And by the way, just as an aside, as that kind of culture that's crooked, a culture that is looking only at here is scared to death of death, because it's it. And some people don't know where they're going if they think there's something else beyond this. But if you're only worried about this, there's going to be whole lots of worry. And that's one of the reasons that you see the kind of the hysteria over COVID. I'm not saying it's not there, it's not dangerous, it's not deadly. You know, we need to look at it wise. But some of the hysteria that I see in people is because all they see is here. You know, and for Paul, you know, here is important. You know, I can't witness to y'all. I can't help you. I don't think he said to y'all. Did he say that? I can't witness. I can't help you. You know, if I'm with Jesus. You know, because then I will be there, silent. Other people carry on. Timothy and Epaphroditus, two of them we're going to talk about in a second. But for me to live as Christ, to die as gain. And so in that context, that's why we can rejoice. You know, I saw that, you know, it's sad when people that are Christians die, but there's also an aspect of rejoicing because there is grief. We won't see them for a while. There is a loss. We won't see them for a while. But there's rejoicing. Like I said, it was my mother and my stepfather and others that were believers that have passed away. It wasn't the same as others that didn't know Jesus. And it's very, very griefful. But for Paul, it says we can rejoice together. We can rejoice together. Then he gives two examples, Timothy in 19 through 24, and then Epaphroditus in 25 through 30. And so basically what he's doing is he's going to send Timothy to get a good report for the Philippians. And apparently Epaphroditus he has already sent with this letter. We're not quite sure exactly how all that worked out, but Epaphroditus he talks about in a minute. But apparently he sent him with this letter back to Philippi. And Timothy, he hopes to send soon to help them and to get a report back about the Philippians. So here's what he says about Timothy. For I have no one else of kindred spirit who will genuinely be concerned with your welfare. So here's Timothy. Timothy is with him. And so I'm going to send Timothy because he's going to help you out. I'm going to send Timothy so I can get a report and I may learn of your condition in verse 19. And so he's sending Timothy. And what kind of guy is Timothy? Well, he's a younger man, younger than Paul, most likely. And he doesn't have anybody that has that kindred spirit. Paul loves the Philippians. He's concerned for that. Timothy has that same kindred spirit for the Philippians. Is that he wants to minister in their lives, to serve them, to find out how they're doing, to report back to Paul. So Timothy, that's what he's doing. That's what his job is going to be. For I have no one else of kindred spirit who will genuinely be concerned for your welfare. And here's a really kind of sad statement. For they all seek after their own interests and not those of Christ Jesus. Back in 14 through 17, he talks about people that are ministering to cause him harm. He's talking about Jesus to cause him harm, and he says, I don't care how it goes out, so as long as the word goes out. You know, here he's talking about, you know, I've got a lot of people around me, and he's being real honest here, and it's really kind of sad that people that he's worked with, especially those that are in Rome, that they don't care about much of anything but themselves. And that's a bad deal. And, you know, we've had disappointments here about people that only are concerned about themselves and even maybe walk out of Christianity. That's a disappointment. And Paul's had that same thing. I mean, he's glad because of Timothy, and Timothy has that same desire for service. And he lifts up Timothy. And again, in a minute, he's going to lift up Epaphroditus in that same way. So Epaphroditus, that's why we think he's already gone. So he's not there. He's already been sent. And it should not be like this. It's like this because human beings are sinful and they walk away. It's not good, but we need to acknowledge it. But you know of Timothy's proven worth, that he served with me in the furtherance of the gospel like a child serving his father. Now, some people take this to mean that he brought Timothy to Christ. I don't think so. Acts 16 doesn't support that because when he came to Lystra, when they had the Macedonian call, they went over to Europe and they came to Lystra, and let me back up. They were at Derbe, Lystra, and then Timothy was at Lystra. He's already a disciple. His mother was Jewish, his father was Greek, and he was a disciple committed to service. And Paul looks at him and says, this is the kind of guy I want on my team, added to Silas and some others. And then they received the Macedonian call. Timothy was part of that, and they went over to Europe and to Philippi. And that was the first church they established in Europe, with Lydia being the first believer in Europe. And so why we know that Timothy is faithful, Paul decided to circumcise him. I won't say anything else. If you're an adult man and somebody asks you to do that, you got to be committed to the service and the ministry of the people you're going to. That's all I got to say about that. But he's part of the team that's called to Europe. He was part of the team that was at Philippi. He was not with Paul and Silas put in jail. Apparently he was somewhere else, but he was in that same context as Paul and Silas were put in jail in Philippi. And so he is sending Timothy, and again, he states that in 23. There I hope soon to send him immediately, as soon as I see how things go with me. So he's going to see if he gets killed or not by the Romans, and then he's going to send Timothy. Okay, so he's waiting for the judgment. When he finds out the judgment, he hope Timothy's going to go tell him what happened and so forth and so on. So apparently Paul was released and went from the pastorals especially. We know that Paul went to some other areas that aren't specified in Acts. Perhaps he came back to Philippi. We don't know, because I trust, he says in 24, I trust in the Lord that I myself will be coming to you shortly. So he's hoping that the judgment will be good. He doesn't know for sure. And so he goes, I'm sending Timothy to you as soon as I find that out. Again, second example, I'm sending Epaphroditus with the letter. He's a brother, fellow worker, fellow soldier. But I thought it necessary to send you Epaphroditus, my brother and fellow worker, fellow soldier, who is also your messenger, which is the word apostle, and messenger, and minister to my needs. So he's a brother. He's a believer in Jesus Christ, not his physical brother, but a believer in Jesus. He's a fellow worker. He is working at the gospel. He is working in ministry. He's a fellow soldier. That means they're focused on the mission of the witness and the discipleship of the church. He's a messenger, an apostle, so he is doing what other people need. He's bringing actually a gift from the Philippian church to Rome, and then Paul is sending him back. And so he's a minister to Paul. While he was there, he helped Paul out. Okay, so this is all big good things for us to be involved in. The same thing as Epaphroditus. Again, I think he's giving two examples of how we ought to walk out what he's talking about. So, but E was sick. They were concerned about him in verse 26, because he was longing for you all and was distressed because you heard that he was sick. Okay, so apparently either on the way to Rome or there, he got sick, and we don't know what from or for, but he was sick, and somehow the grapevine got back to Philippi that he was sick, and so he was distressed that they had heard that. And this word is used by Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, the same word, distressed, okay? And that he was sick. For indeed he was sick to the point of death, but God had mercy on him, and not only on him, but also me, so that I would not have sorrow upon sorrow, okay? So what we find out about Epaphroditus is that in the course of ministry, he got sick. Some suggest he was working so hard that he got sick over it. Whether he had pneumonia, whether he had yellow fever, we don't know what he had, but he was sick. Paul did not say, I prayed for him and he was healed. He says, God had mercy. God is the one who healed Epaphroditus. And he had mercy on Epaphroditus because now he's not sick. I'd like that mercy myself, if I was sick. But also on Paul, because he was concerned with him. And so God had mercy on both by healing Epaphroditus, even though he had worked basically probably to exhaustion in being a minister and being a help and in service. And so that tells us a little something. It's not bad to be sick. You know, you're not evil if you're sick. You know, that was, Jesus got asked about that. You know, who sinned, this person or he or this person? No. Why was this person sick? To show God's glory. You know, and it's in the same context, that same kind of context. He's sick, but God healed him. Now, God doesn't heal everybody, but he healed him. And so mercy, and we can thank God for that healing. Where am I? God healed, sends them back so that they would be assured. And again, apparently the letter, and then Timothy's coming later when he finds out about Paul. And what he says, receive and hold in high regard this person. Receive him in the Lord with all joy, and hold men, the Greek is such ones, in high regard like him, because he came close to the work of Christ, risking his life to complete what was deficient in your service to me. So when you read that, it might have been he was sick because he was attacked on the road to Rome. You know, we don't know. But he's risking his life because of service. An example of service, a sacrifice for another, witnessing for Jesus. So that's Epaphroditus. Timothy, Epaphroditus. So what? What's the point? Do all things without grumbling and disputing. That's hard, right? Can't do it without the help of the Holy Spirit in the transformed life. That's why it's kind of a progressive thing, even as Paul is talking about that. As you progressively do this, as people watch you, you become blameless, innocent kids of God, okay? And then kind of be rejoicing, no matter what we see. And I mean, for Paul, in this world, it was the worst thing, or almost the worst, well, two pretty worst things. His possible death, Epaphroditus' possible sickness unto death. I mean, two pretty bad things, but what is it, the context? Joy. Rejoice in these things. Rejoice that God is working. Rejoice for what God has done for us. Rejoice what Jesus has done for us. Rejoice in the resurrection. Haven't got it yet, but we're working towards it. That's in Philippians 2. Anyway. Prove yourself as children of lights in this perverse world. Yes, we're perverse. We live in a perverse world. Hopefully we're not perverse. Hopefully we're lights in this perverse world. Rejoice in those. Be like Timothy. Be like Epaphroditus. Faithful servants. You know, I was thinking about kind of a story to kind of end with, you know, and there's a lot of people that are here or that have been through here that are faithful people and faithful witnesses, and like Timothy and Epaphroditus. But I decided not to embarrass anybody. I'll embarrass Chris and Ann. They live next door and they're not here. So, you know, during the snow and storm and everything, they had to leave, but they didn't have a bad attitude about it. They didn't grumble to me. I mean, they might have grumbled together, but I didn't hear any of it. They you know, we just went and stayed with somebody who had their lights and power on. You know, we had a good time over there, and you know, they come back and said, we're going to check on the house, and they check, you know, and I said, you know, while you're there, just kind of check on the church. And so they come over here and they tramp around, and they see water coming out right here down the street, down this little back here. So they come in, they have a key. We trust them. And so in the back here, there's water coming everywhere out from underneath the sink. There was a pipe that had broke, and the turnoff was on the wrong side, so it was coming out. And hope, you know, it's good we have a hole outside right here, so it didn't come out here, it didn't come in the nursery. But okay, and we try to turn it off. You don't know, you know what? We don't have a key for the deal out there. So I come in, and I mean, before I'm halfway in the thing over here, they're coming out of the house to help. And so they walked with me over here to try to get this fixed. Now they could have said, "Oh, Greg's here. We're just going to, hang out, and not worry about it. He's got it." No, but they wanted to help in service. And that's the kind of attitude here that Paul is talking about, being servants for Jesus. Don't tell them I said that. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for who you are. We thank you for Paul and his attitude. Here, as he expresses his heart for people being lights in this world, as he recognizes two people that are examples of that light. Father, help us as we walk in this crooked and perverse world, that we will indeed be the kind of people that Paul's talking about here. In the name of Jesus. And all of God's people said,